Welcome to Anime Archaeologist. What if I told you that Disney was defeated by a Japanese movie not once but twice? You heard this right. Today, I'll be talking about the time when the Demon Slayer movie had beaten both Raya and Turning Red at the box office. Warning, let there be spoilers. First, allow me to introduce the films. On the Japanese side, there's Demon Slayer Mugen Train, or as it's called in English, Demon Slayer Infinity Train. This is not to be confused with Infinity Train as it's an unrelated show altogether. In 2019, it was announced that there's gonna be a Demon Slayer movie. Because of the great unmentionable, the release of this movie was delayed until October 16, 2020 in Japan. The international release was so slow because of the great unmentionable, which had caused the movie to be released as early as October 30, 2020 in Taiwan to as late as August 31st, 2021 in India. Next, I'll be introducing Raya and the Last Dragon on the Disney side. In 2018, it was reported by Deadline Hollywood that Disney was planning to make a movie. Due to how secretive Disney is about production, it wasn't known what the project was until 2020 when Raya and the Last Dragon was announced. Originally, Raya and the Last Dragon was supposed to premiere on November 25th, 2020. But, due to the great unmentionable, the premiere was delayed until March 5th, 2021. On that day, it was also premiered on Disney Plus Premier Access for a fee until June 4th, 2021. Lastly, I'll be introducing the most controversial movie in this video, Turning Red on the Disney side. In 2017, a film director by the name of Domishi had just finished her short film called Bao when Pixar had invited her to pitch movie ideas for them. Domishi had pitched a movie about puberty and Pixar agreed on this. It took Pixar just 4 years to develop this movie and it was finished on December 10th, 2020. It took Disney more than a year to go from the finished product to the box office, however, due to the great unmentionable. On March 11th, 2022, Turning Red was released on Disney Plus. As to why, I'll get to that part later. Now, what did Demon Slayer Mugen Train get right that Raya and Turning Red didn't? I won't be comparing their respective stories as it's like comparing apples to oranges to grapes. Instead, I'll be comparing how these movies were marketed. First, I'll go for Raya and the Last Dragon. You'd think that a movie set in Southeast Asia would be very popular here in Southeast Asia, right? Nope. Raya and the Last Dragon barely got any marketing here in Southeast Asia to begin with. I'll explain why this is, and it's gonna get really complicated from here. First, Disney's main presence in Southeast Asia is centered in just 2 countries, Singapore and Malaysia. You can't access Disney Plus in most parts of Southeast Asia. It used to be the case that Disney Channel was available for Southeast Asian cable services. That said, it was pulled as early as 2020 in Singapore. As to why, this was because Disney decided to put most of their Southeast Asian broadcasts under Disney Plus. I'll get back to this later. Disney's main areas of interests are Malaysia and Singapore. This is shown by the fact that Disney's headquarters in Southeast Asia is in Singapore and most of the Disney programming made in Southeast Asia are made in Malaysia. I am of course referring to Upin and Ipin, Bobo Boy Galaxy, Ejen Ali, and Waktu Rehat. In comparison, Disney has one show which is made in Singapore, As the Bell Rings. Second, Disney does not have a lot of experience in Southeast Asia. Now, I will be comparing this to Ibero-America as it's the closest that I can compare Disney's operations in. Warning! Geography and History. Why does Disney have more experience in Ibero-America as compared to Southeast Asia? This is where things get quite complicated. First, I'll have to define what I mean by Ibero-America. The region called Ibero-America refers to the countries and territories where Spanish or Portuguese is the predominant language. The Ibero refers to Spain and Portugal, which had colonized the area that we now call Ibero-America. Next is the history part. On December 7th, 1941,
a date which will live in infamy.
Japan had attacked the American naval base in Pearl Harbor. On the same day, Japan had invaded the Philippines. I had talked about the latter in a different video and I will link it in the description below. Because of the attack on Pearl Harbor, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt of the United States of America had made a speech on the following day. On December 11, 1941, Germany had also declared war on the United States. This means that the Americans were facing a war not just on two fronts, but a potential war on all four fronts. To the west is Japan. To the east is Europe. To the north was the then territory of Alaska, which was threatened by Japanese invasion, along with Canada and Great Britain, which had to deal with the prospect of German invasion. To the south are the nations of Ibero-America. Since America got declared on by Germany, this meant that the United States had effectively become an ally of Great Britain and Canada. With the North secured by force of arms by both the United States, Canada, and Great Britain, this leaves the Americans dealing with the Japanese to their west and the Germans to the east, along with the nations of Ibero-America to the south. President Roosevelt was afraid that the nations of Ibero-America would join the Germans, so he decided to deal with them diplomatically. To this end, he had formed the Office of the Coordinator of Inter-American Affairs, and he had appointed Nelson Rockefeller to head it. What the OCIAA had done was promote the United States to Ibero-American nations via making radio shows, live-action movies, and animated movies, promoting friendship between the United States and the Ibero-American nations. One such person who got appointed to do this was none other than Walt Disney himself. Yes, you heard me right. Walt Disney was appointed as a Goodwill Ambassador of the OCIAA in 1941 and had made a couple of animated movies set in Ibero-America. These are Saludos Amigos, which was released on August 24th, 1942, and The Three Caballeros, which was released on December 21st, 1944. This, along with the other efforts of the OCIAA, had made the Ibero-American nations support the United States of America in World War II. Two had even joined the side of the Allies, Brazil and Mexico. The Brazilians had sent a military division of their own in Europe called the Smoking Snakes, and they had fought the Germans in Italy. The Mexicans had sent their own military division to fight the Japanese in the Philippines called the Aztec Eagles. Due to Disney's involvement in the OCIAA, this gave the Americans the idea to make animated movies and animated shows which are set in Ibero-America and have Ibero-American characters. Of course, this is done more recently. Is it because of Disney embracing diversity like what Saber Spark had once said on Twitter? Hardly. In Disney's case, this is done more recently due to the death of Walt Disney in 1966. When he had died, his board of directors had decided to fire his own brother, Roy Disney, from the board. This had caused the Disney company to go into what the Disney fans called the Dark Age of Disney. Why? Because the board decided to make movies as Walt would have liked. This meant that the movies made in this era were typically cliché and trite. It wouldn't be until 1988 when the Walt Disney Company would have a financially successful movie called Oliver and Company. Financial success did give Disney more reasons to go for diverse settings and characters again. That said, the Americans have been making shows and movies which are set in Ibero-America and have Ibero-American characters since 1942. Road to El Dorado was made in 2000 by DreamWorks Animation. The Emperor's New Groove was also made in the same year but by Disney. Mucha Lucha was made in 2002 and had aired on Cartoon Network. El Tigre was made in 2005 by Nickelodeon. Rio was made in 2011 by 20th Century Fox Animation. Encanto was made in 2021 by Disney. This is not some esoteric knowledge. Rather, these are historical facts. In comparison, Southeast Asia gets very little in terms of the Hollywood animation treatment because the Americans for the longest time have only gone to Southeast Asia to film some live-action movies in it, such as Apocalypse Now, which was filmed here in the Philippines back in the late 1970s, and Kickboxer, which was filmed in Thailand in the late 1980s. Until Raya, The closest that the Americans had to having Southeast Asian characters in animation were Khan Sufanusinphone and his family from King of the Hill, Mr. Win from Hey Arnold, and Lars Barriga from Steven Universe. Khan and his family are Laotian immigrants to America. Mr. Win is a refugee from Vietnam, and Lars is a Filipino-American. The Starship Troopers animated series could have had Johnny Rico be portrayed as a Filipino like in the novel, but the show decided to portray him as an Argentinian because reasons. Disney had overestimated and underestimated their presence here in Southeast Asia. How, you may ask? Simple. Disney had overestimated their presence in Southeast Asia because they thought that simply airing their shows here in Southeast Asia would give Raya the hype to be successful. This same company had also underestimated themselves here in Southeast Asia by not advertising Raya in The Last Dragon at all. You'd think that the primary market for Raya, Southeast Asia, would get many advertisements about it. However, those of us here in Southeast Asia didn't get much ads about it at best. Worse was that Raya isn't that available here in Southeast Asia legally. Now, it can be argued that it's because of the great unmentionable causing quarantines to happen, which led to movie theaters closing. But that's not an excuse as Raya was available in theaters in Malaysia and Thailand, while Disney Plus was available in Indonesia and Singapore. Quarantine or no quarantine, Disney Plus still exists. Thus, Raya had failed in that area that it set in Southeast Asia. The lack of Disney Plus here in Southeast Asia had hurt this movie's chances of financial success. Raya's budget was around $100 million. What Raya had earned was $130 million at the time of this recording. At best, it's barely a success. At worst, it's still a failure because of the advertisement costs in North America. Next is Turning Red, also known as Pixar's worst movie in terms of box office earnings. I remember when Turning Red was a thing online and how so many people had defended this movie from MrEnter's review of it back in April 2022. You'd think that this very popular movie would be a financial success for Pixar and Disney, right? Not a chance. In terms of the box office, this movie about puberty was a massive failure for Disney. How? Compared to the earlier part about Raya, it's quite simple this time. Unlike Raya, which was released in the movie theaters and is still on Disney Plus for free, Turning Red just went to Disney Plus for free instead. You'd think that this is because of the great unmentionable, but it's less the fault of quarantines and more the fault of Disney deciding not to monetize Turning Red at all. All the hype about how Turning Red as the first Asian protagonist in animated films didn't even do much financially. For the record, the first Asian main character in a Disney film was Mowgli from the 1967 Disney film called The Jungle Book, which is an adaptation of Rudyard Mahuatman's Burden Kipling's The Jungle Book. If we're looking at Asian girl protagonists in Disney movies, Turning Red was not even the first to do this either, because Mulan was released in 1998. Now, let's look at Pixar more closely. Turning Red was not the first Pixar movie to have an Asian protagonist either. That would be Pixar's own Up, which was made in 2009. Yes, Russell from Up is an Asian boy. At least Raya was monetized on Disney Plus Premier Access for a few months after it was released. Is it any wonder that Turning Red is a financial failure? Turning Red had a budget of $175 million. It had earned a whopping $20 million. Sarcasm aside, this movie didn't earn much of anything, and it even managed to piss off Pixar employees. Thus, Turning Red can't claim any firsts other than Pixar's first major financial failure. The massive amount of marketing ranging from the San Francisco Zoo naming one of the red pandas as Mei Li because turning red, to Air Canada putting up images of turning red on their Airbus A220 planes, along with almost endless praise and defenses aimed at turning red from both the usual press outlets and social media, didn't even save this movie from being a massive flop.
Failure! Failure! You're still a failure!
All those videos attacking MrEnter for his review of the movie along with Turning Red's dominance on TikTok amounted to a grand total of failure for this movie on the box office. So, who is to blame for this? Is it people like MrEnter who didn't praise this movie to the high heavens? Or is it due to Disney's supreme incompetence? For the record, MrEnter was even-handed in his review of that movie. If there's someone to blame, that would be Disney. Now, I'm gonna go on how the Demon Slayer Mugen train beat up both Raya and Turning Red in the box office. As I've said in the beginning, Demon Slayer Mugen train has had to deal with multiple delays caused by the Great Unmentionable. But, much like with Yu Izumi's amusement park date in episode 12 of Shikimori-san, this bad luck ended up becoming good luck. How? Simple. When Demon Slayer Mugen Train was finally released, people in Japan had flocked to the movie theaters just to watch it. This had made Demon Slayer Mugen Train earn $506.5 million by the time of this recording. The budget? $15.7 million. As of this recording, Demon Slayer Mugen Train had earned the whopping 3,223% of its budget. It had even dethroned Spirited Away as Japan's highest earning movie. Spirited Away had earned $395.8 million. It took Demon Slayer Mugen Train 73 days to surpass Spirited Away's 19-year record. In terms of marketing, Demon Slayer Mugen Train had even gone so far as to have a real-life steam locomotive made to look like the steam locomotive from the movie in a process called cross-promotion. I'll link my source of this to the description below. Compared to Raya's $130 million and Turning Red's $20 million, Demon Slayer Mugen Train had beaten them both at the box office. Raya and the Last Dragon didn't even hype itself, while Turning Red didn't make money off its hype, while Demon Slayer Mugen Train made money off its massive hype. The era of generic Hollywood movies is now ending, ladies and gents. Japan had proven to us that people want actual stories with depth, not some movie made to please the terminally online wokesters on Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok. Please like, share, and subscribe.